for joining us today. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for this, it's called a member-initiated meeting of the 2022 Population Association of America. You don't have to be at that meeting because we're virtual, and you're here just to watch this rather than to be at the meeting. That's fine too. This is a session on using the census and the American Community Survey in classes, undergraduate classes, graduate student classes, and so forth, with a team of people. We've been doing this now at several PAA meetings. I don't want to say how many, but some of us were a lot younger when we first started doing this. And it's a way to get teachers, students, graduate students, and others able to use the various data sources from the Census Bureau in your classes, from the undergraduate level all the way up to the graduate student level. And we have people here to do that can deal with all of those kinds of things. I belong to the University of Michigan Social Science Data Analysis Network. I'm Bill Frey. And what we do for our part of the show today is going to show people how to use census data and ACS data in very low-level classes, or rather introductory level classes, kinds of classes that people don't normally put data analysis in. And a lot of the tools that we produced in terms of data sets and modules were made just for that purpose, to make it easy for students to handle, to make it easy for teachers to handle. And we'll be talking about that. Mark Mather of the Population Reference Bureau will join us after that and talk about a lot of the resources that they have. I think most people have heard of the Population Reference Bureau. They've been around for many years, Mark? I don't know. Many years. And they put out bulletins. They have a website and make data accessible to teachers, to researchers, to the general public. And it's always interesting and informative to hear Mark say what the PRB is currently doing, and we're going to have a chance to do that. After that, if the schedule goes according to plans, we'll have a 5-minute break where you can go out and have get something, a bite to eat, or stretch your legs, or do whatever you want to, just 5 minutes. And then we'll come back for the last part of it, and probably the best part of it in terms of what a lot of people here are looking for, and that's an overview of Social Explorer. Andy Beveridge and Jeff Hahn will be talking about what that has to offer. It's a fantastic resource. If you haven't heard of it, it's really worth your while to stay on for the last part of this webinar, probably the longest and most interesting part of this webinar, and how to use their fantastic tool, a mapping tool, a data tool that's used all over the country, all over the world, really. And it's an integral part of this thing that we do at PAA every year, and it's very popular. So, we've covered all angles, and we're going to have some time at the end for questions. You can also put some notes in the chat as well and ask questions. We'll try to get around to those if we can. But we really appreciate everybody being here the day before the real population meeting sessions start tomorrow morning. So before I start in about the Social Science Data Analysis Network, I'm going to hand the baton over to John DeWitt, JP DeWitt, who is the manager of our project and has been with us for a long time, and is going to give you a little bit of overview of the data that we have, and then we're going to come back to me with a little look at our website and what you can do for your class. So JP?
Just a quick comment, Bill. There's a number of people who wanted to know about whether the video will be available, and I think maybe you could say where it's going to be put.
Hi, Andy. I'll address some of that right now. I was just about to do that. So we're getting a lot of, there are two key things that I wanted to mention, seeing all the chats come in. First off is that I do want to say that if you have questions, it might be better to put them in the Q&A. We're getting a lot of chatter in the chat. So we may not see your questions come in through there. So if you have questions, please pose them to us in the Q&A. Also, one of the things that Andy just highlighted is that there have been a few questions about whether a video will be available. Yes, there will be a video made available of this webinar. We are recording. There are a few ways in which you can find it. First of all, all of the registrants. We collected your email when you registered for the event. We will send out to your email address a link to the video when it's available. I expect that it'll be available either later this week or early next week. We will also post it on our site, ssdan.net, and we will also make it available for PRB and Social Explorer if your teams intend to also make it available on your own sites. So as we jump into the American Community Survey, I expect that many of you may have at least some sort of passing familiarity. So we're not going to spend a lot of time digging into the nitty-gritty of the survey. There are other opportunities, I'm sure, at PAA where you can learn much, much more in depth. Our focus is really to let you know about resources for bringing data, ACS and census data into your course. So I will cover just a very brief top-level kind of view of the American Community Survey. So many of you may wonder how it's kind of connected to the decennial census. It is the successor to the long form of the decennial census, which was available until the 2000 census. The American Community Survey picked up in 2005. It samples, however, throughout the year, whereas the decennial census is a point measure that comes up once every 10 years. The American Community Survey is released as a period estimate continuously through either 1 year or 5 year data releases. The sample size is about 3.5 million residents. This has been growing in recent years. It comes out to, approaching 300,000 or so households per month. So one of the reasons we've always liked the American Community Survey, and before that, the decennial census's long form for bringing data analysis into the classroom, is just really the wide range of topics that the data products cover. This slide just simply shows, I'm not going to go through each single topic, but it shows just some of the topics that are available for the individual respondent. You can see up at the top, this says population or person level. There's another slide that we have that shows the types of topics that are available in the American Community Survey at the for the housing unit. We find that as a result, the breadth of topics available really kind of lend themselves to a wide range of classes. Originally, we focused on sociology, but we found that our data analysis exercises have made their way into many other disciplines, including public health, political science, even English, and math. So as you may already know, the American Community Survey is released for different types of geographies. This gets into just something briefly that I'm going to talk about in a moment, the difference between microdata and summary data. But most of the time when many of us may think about, or many in the public may think about the American Community Survey or census data, they're thinking about the summary data. And so those are oftentimes released at levels like states, counties, cities, metropolitan areas. So we have both the legal and administrative areas, as well as some of those specific statistical areas that are defined by the government for specific tabulations. So census tracts, census block groups, and the like. So I mentioned earlier that there are two general types of data products that are released. One is the summary data. And those are the types of data that I think a lot of people expect when we talk about the census and American Community Survey. Those are the types of tabular, oftentimes products, that describe a geographic unit or a population as a whole? What percentage of X geography fits some sort of criteria? On the left side, I mentioned just a few types of data products that are available for summary data. These are oftentimes the types of analysis that may be looking and simply just kind of interpreting tables, interpreting data visualizations like maps. We're going to hear hopefully a lot about Social Explorer today and some of the resources, great resources it provides. But those are summary data. Later, I'm going to briefly just touch on something called Census Reporter, which is also one of my favorite resources out there. On the other hand, there are products that use microdata. Microdata are the respondent level or household level, housing unit level responses to the survey. Whereas the summary data relies on tables that are published by the Census Bureau, the microdata permit users to dig much, much more deeply into the data. And so there are a lot of drawbacks though that come with working sometimes with microdata. So unless you're working with some sort of repackaged data set, the microdata can be overwhelmingly complex to those users who don't have some sort of experience working with the microdata. But we are going to have Bill a little bit later talk a little bit about WebChip and how we use microdata to make repackaged data sets for use in early undergraduate education. One other thing to highlight is that there are 1-year and 5-year data releases, particularly of the both of these summary data and the microdata. One of the issues to be aware of with the summary data are that the 1-year data are only released for geographic entities with at least 65,000 people. Now, when it comes to states, that will cover every state in the country. But if you are interested in looking at differences between counties, for example, only about a quarter of the counties have 65,000 people or more. Now, I mentioned that Bill's going to talk a little bit about WebChip, but I want to give you a quick overview of what you can find in data count, or what you can find with WebChip and some of our resources. So data counts is kind of the portal that we have to the WebChip statistical program. The WebChip statistical program is just a very simple, for the most part, contingency table creator that really tries to take a lot of the complexity of advanced statistical packages out and tries to allow the opportunity for students to kind of, I like to say that it's easy to play with the data, but hard to kind of break the system. Easy to play with, hard to break. So WebChip just allows students to look at relationships between a few variables on the data set, which have been all categorized. We have, at this point, about 3,000 different data sets that are available, some which go back to 1950. So we have some trend data sets. We also have some data sets that are just slices in time. So we have some data sets from 2000, for example. But the whole idea is to bring more data into the classroom early on in the undergraduate career. Some of the topics covered by the data sets that we have in WebChip are listed here. Something to point out is that we've been providing these data sets now for a couple of decades, for a few decades. And so at this point, we've also collected a number of learning modules that faculty members have used in their own courses. And they've adopted this sort of framework, had their students analyze ACS data in their courses. They've developed learning modules that they then want to share with a wider community. So we have something in the area of 100 different data-driven learning modules that can oftentimes be kind of plug and played or adapted with very little effort for use in your own course. Before I turn things over to Bill, these are some of the resources that I think are just fascinating for introducing students to the American Community Survey and decennial census data. The one thing I wanted to highlight is the one at the top, which you will not hear too much about today, but is just one of my go-to all-time favorites. Census Reporter, it provides data profiles for different areas. You can put in an address to a specific location, say your home, and you can find out what census block group, census tract, ZICTA, zip code tabulation area, etc. you fall into. You can then look at profiles driven by American Community Survey data for all those different geographic levels of summary, or levels of geographic summary. You can also see the individual questions that relate to different topics on the American Community Survey. So you can see how the disability question is asked, for example. The disability questions are asked, for example. You can, beyond that, go to individual tables. You can see which tables are related to which topics. It's just a great resource that I think if you don't have a lot of familiarity with the American Community Survey, it's a great resource in which you can kind of freshen up your own understanding of the American Community Survey, but also it's a great kind of one-stop shop for students who might be looking to create, say, community profiles. This is kind of a common one for some of the public health courses we've seen. That you can get a lot of information and kind of get like a general profile, demographic profile of the community at different levels, everything from the block group to the state and above. And with that, I'll turn things over to Bill, who will talk more about specifically data counts and WebChip. Bill.
Okay, thank you, JP. I'm going to try to share my screen here and see how well this goes. And where we're at is the homepage for the project of SSDAN, the Social Science Data Analysis Network, which I said earlier is at the Population Studies Center at the University of Michigan. And it's funded by NICHD with a lot of extra funding over the years from other places that we're very grateful for. As JP started to indicate, a lot of our data sets and our modules are based for very early courses that don't necessarily have any data analysis in it at all. Introductory sociology or sociology of the family, or gender studies and things where people are interested, teachers are interested in bringing concepts across to students and have them deal with the content of the area, but often don't have the students involved in interactively dealing with data. And of course, the census, the decennial census up to 2000 and from 2010 and from then onward, the American Community Survey provides a lot of details on all kinds of topics that are relevant to courses of all kinds: race, education, household type, disability, aging, labor force, you name it. There's just tons of data, and it can be done at all levels of geography, pretty much all levels of geography. And the real issue is, if you're a teacher in one of these courses and maybe don't do a lot of data analysis yourself, other than maybe on the research side, but not as much on the teaching side, is how can you get something that's easily transportable for from your class that will give your students a taste of some data analysis with these rich census and American Community Survey data, without holding up the class too much, without giving them allowing so much time for training of statistical packages and things like that. But they can get right to the meat of the data to answer questions that you'd like to have them, to pose questions that you'd like to have them answer, and also make it easier for yourself so that you don't have to do a lot of prep work. That's the kind of audience we've had in mind when we put all of this stuff together. And our website here has lots of stuff on it that you can see. We talk about our events. Eventually, this webinar is going to be on there as a video that you can pull down and look at. Various resources, but the key for the in-class stuff is what we call data counts, which, as JP alluded to, is a software package which allows students and teachers to very easily access and analyze contingency tables that we put together for express purposes of answering particular kinds of questions in classes, both suggested to us by other teachers, but also put together by ourselves. And the first page of data counts of our website, by the way, the website URL is ssdan.net, ssdan.net. And when you get to the data counts page, it gives you kind of an overview of the different kinds of data sets that we have. All these data sets are multi-level contingency tables. That means there's no more than 5 variables in any of these little data sets, and there are no more than 9 categories for any of the variables. To make it simpler, we don't want to necessarily have teachers and students spending a lot of time with recoding, with extracting. We've done all of that. What the teachers have to do, what you do as an instructor, is to try to figure out which data sets you need to make the kinds of cases and make the kinds of points that you do in your classes. And I have to say, we still have a little way to go to keep up with the 2020 census and the 5-year 2020 ACS. They're not up there yet on our website, but they will be there soon. The 2020 ACS data will be there soon. So the kinds of data that you see here that I'll sort of take you through a little bit today will be updated in the very near future with the 2016 to 2020 American Community Survey, which is the 5-year ACS. If you follow this stuff, you know that the Census Bureau decided that 5 years from 2016 through 2020 averaged together in a way is what they're sort of suggesting you use to get a sense of what's happened around 2020. The 1-year ACS has had some difficulties because of they got held up a little bit with the pandemic and the interviewing. So the 5-year ACS is going to be best for you to use with the 2020 census. So we're going to put some data sets up for this. And later in our, I know Andy Beveridge is going to talk about, he already has that up on the Social Explorer if you're interested in getting that. So anyway, we have all of these little data sets and we call it WebChip. By the way, the side of this data counts web page has modules. I'll show you a couple of those later. These are modules that have already faculty have produced and want to share with others, and we have put them on our website. We invite you to do the same thing if you put some modules together for your classes. We have a variable glossary. We have frequently asked questions, have a place where you can actually submit a model if you want to share it with other people. But the meat of this for your classes and for your data analysis is the WebChip link here. And what the WebChip link here is, and WebChip is a software that actually began, I guess, in the late 80s by the sociologist Jim Davis of Harvard. He used this data set to have students analyze general social survey data, and we adapted it and put it on the web with his and his colleagues' permission with census data on WebChip. But as I said, the basic idea of this is to let students put together 2-way tables with maybe 1 or 2 controls that make it easier for them to analyze data. We have various different collections. The main collections have the bigger number of variables, and as I say, we're going to be updating these to the 2016 to 2020 ACS. We have state level data, but only for a few variables for each state, but we have those variables for each and every state. We have single year data, which we've taken from the 1-year ACS, and we have it up through 2019. Those ACS 2018 and ACS 19, they sort of follow on down here. And then we have some other sort of specialized data sets. One of them I'm going to demonstrate here is the ACS 2018 5-year data. This is the one we're going to update with the 2020 5-year data. But each of these are made up, and I'll look at this 2018 5-year data collection. And in this collection, all taken from the 5-year data, 2018 ACS, have many different little data sets. And they're kind of given names that sort of describe what's in them. Most of our data sets have as variables age, sex or gender, and race, but then also have other kinds of variables. So we kind of see age, sex or gender, and race as kind of the control variables or the independent variables. And then the other kinds of variables like education or earnings, language ability, and some of our other data sets and other kinds of things, poverty and so forth, as a dependent variable. But it's for you to choose how you want to use these data sets in your class. I'm going to demonstrate today a data set with which we call EduEarn, if I can find it here. Earn Edu, sorry. It has earnings on it and it has education. And when you click it down there, you'll see I'm doing here that it describes the data set, 5 categories of age. When it says age educ, it means that's an age classification we use with our education data sets. It means that people only age 25 and over. Typically, when you look at educational attainment with census data, you want to restrict that to people age 25 and over. Race, ethnicity is one variable. Education, earnings, and sex. Sometimes we call it gender, and this one we call it sex. And what you can do to begin with, and again, these are the only variables that are on here, and you see they only have a few number of categories on each. You hit that compute marginals, and you can see what the marginals are for each of those different variables. Again, from the 5-year 2018 ACS. And by the way we produce these variables is we took the microdata from the 5-year ACS and just kind of tabulated it, and to make this kind of very big cross tabulation. So the original part of the data are from the microfiles of the 2018 ACS. And so you can see the general tabulations. But let's get to a hypothesis. Let's just have a very simple hypothesis that says the more education you have, the more you're going to earn. Okay, it's a fairly straightforward thing. And so you can put a row variable here, and let's say, look at education level. And then the column variable, we're going to use earnings. So that's, we're going to look at the relationship between education and earnings. And by the way, people have different preferences when they put these tables together for their students. Some people are very dictatorial. They always want to have the dependent variable as a row variable, or always have the dependent variable as the column variable. You can do whatever you want to here. I'm making the dependent variable a column, which is going to be earnings. And if you go all the way down here and say percent across, on the top of the flow, you see that table shows up from 0 to 9. These are all people age 25 and over. So people that have only 0 to 9 years of education, they are already age 25. So that's a very low level of education, all the way up to PhD level. And you can see at the very bottom right-hand part of the table, 50% of those people who are PhDs or professionals make over $100,000 a year. And in order to get a better view of this, we have different chart mechanisms here. And I'm going to use the bar chart. And what you can see with this bar chart is that for each education category, you have an income distribution or earnings distribution, where for those people with very low levels of education, very skewed toward the lower earnings categories, people with high levels of education, very skewed toward the higher education categories, or higher earnings categories, people with PhDs way up in terms of that. And there's lots of other ways you can put these tables together. You might also want to control this and want to say, well, gee, does this happen the same way for men and for women? And so we have a control feature here. And if you hit control, you can make that table again, percent across, and it produces that table separately for males, separately for females. And you can also do that bar chart if you want to. And what you'll see is, oops, it kind of looks the same, except on the male chart, which is the first one, you have a much stronger skew toward the higher income at the higher levels of education. It still goes toward high income for women, but those levels of income aren't as high as they are for men, something you might expect. And you could look at that directly if you wanted to. You could also control this, by the way, if you want to wipe the thing clean, you could say clear workbook, but you can also control this same table, say by race, ethnicity. So we already have in there education by earnings, but instead of saying by sex control, oops, we'll say race, ethnicity as a control. And it pops up one of those tables for each of the major race ethnic groups that we have here, including, I'll just start up, non-Hispanic whites, non-Hispanic blacks, American Indians, and Native Alaskans, Asians, multi-race, and we have some other race, which is sort of stuck in there, and then Hispanics. And if you wanted to do that, those bar charts separately, in other words, what for each of these racial groups, we're looking at the relationship between education and earnings. Does the same kind of relationship hold up for each of these different groups? And more or less it does, although when you get to Asians, see if I can push this up a little further. It's very high for the very highly educated groups. I just point that out. There's lots of other things that you can see here. But the point is, you know, with not too much effort on your part or on the student's part, you can put something together that gets some kind of meaty, and you'll pick your own hypotheses from your own, you know, the various data sets that we have to offer. I just chose this one as a matter of an example. I do want to show another one. And because the other kind of data set we have here are trend data. And we're also going to update these when the 2020 census, the ACS. And I'm going to look at, this takes a trend data and goes from the 1950 census, every decennial census up to 2000. And then we have 2008 ACS and 2016 ACS. We're going to update that. So the latter two date points are going to be 2020 ACS and 2010 ACS and 2020 ACS. But if you look at the marginals, you can see that we have age in this. We have race, ethnicity. We have educational attainment. We have earnings, and we have males. So I'm trying to remember what I put up here, and I don't have. Let me put this together because I have a different data set than I thought I was going to do. Let me try this. I'm going to do the household data set. So I'm going to try that again. I apologize for taking a wild leap here. This is a household data set, and it shows us for different years over time, household type by race, by age, and household size. Now I'm going to compute those marginals. I confused myself there. And so those are the different years that we have in here, 1950 up to 2016. Race for that long period of time, because of the different ways races were categorized back to 1950, we look at black and non-black rather than all the other racial groups. Although for more recent censuses, say since 1980, we can do a lot more. Age, household type, and so forth. So what I'm going to do here is just give a sense of what you can do with this, to just look at how household types have changed from 1950 to 2016. Let's make household type the row. Let's make year the column, and let's percent down. So when you look at this, you can see that 1950, 77% of households were married couple households. 1916, only a little less than half are married couple households. And if you let's do a stacked bar chart here, which shows that this large blue part are the married couple households. And by the way, you can click into these different parts of the bar and see the actual numbers pop up. So back in 1950, 77% married couple households, female-headed non-family household, or female-headed non-family households are 7.2%, and go all the way up here to 2016. Married couple households, I said, were 47%. See sort of big shifts going down in this direction. And you can also control this. Suppose you want to control this analysis by race. And control variable race. And we're going to percent down again. Gives you two separate tables, one for blacks, one for non-blacks, and one for blacks. And we can do this stacked bar again for those two groups. And what you see is for both of the groups, the married couple households went down. They were somewhat lower for blacks than they were for non-blacks in 1950, and wind up being much lower at the end. But for both broad groups, they go down over time. But you can get into that in more detail and understand why that occurred and which groups had increased over time. And again, you can control by age if you want to. You can also look at household size and just this little data set, and which looks like a fairly simple thing for you to do, and it is. took a lot of work to be able to take all the microfiles from the 1950, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 2000 census, as well as the last two American Community surveys, 2008 and 2016. You have the power of putting all that together with kind of just a simple exercise. And that's kind of our goal with this project. And we hope that, you know, that's something that you can get into, especially when we update these data sets in the next several weeks. I want to go back to the main page here on data counts, just to show you that we do have, as JP said, we have a lot of modules that teachers have already done to share. Here's one, investigating the effect of race, sex, age, and poverty level on disability in the United States. This is by one of our colleagues, Jill Bauma of Berea College. And what she has here, she has the author, the learning goals, the context for use, file attachments, and so forth. And, you know, all of our modules have that sort of thing. So you might not want to use hers exactly, but you might want to use hers as kind of a model of what you might want to do on your own. So we have that sort of stuff there as well. And as I said, when you want to submit a module, let me put this going here, you can, it asks you the activity type, the author, email, short description, a summary, derived from, URL of the original SSDAN activity, goals, context for use, grade level, middle school, high school, college, professional graduate, and so forth, an activity description and teaching materials. So, you know, it helps you to think a little bit more about what you're doing if you want to share this with us, but it's certainly very valuable for everyone, and we encourage that. Just want to say a couple more things about what we have in our SSDAN project, which might be useful, especially since this is part of the PAA meetings. And that is, we have another website called PIPS, Programs in the Population Sciences. And this is meant for students who are interested in having careers in demography. We try to update this as much as possible with updating sort of application deadlines for graduate school, up deadlines for kinds of, you know, internships and so forth that are related to demography. Here, for example, upcoming deadlines for May 22nd, May 2nd, 2022, the Center for American Life intern, Demographics and Political Economy intern, and others down there. We also have descriptions of each of the major population centers that have graduate programs in demography, just starting out here with Bowling Green, Brown University, City University of New York, Cornell, and so forth. You can go down the list and into separate pages. If your program isn't in here and you want it to be, let me know, and we will make sure that you're part of that. Little discussion about careers in demography, whether you're in academia, think tank, government, so forth, and all kinds of other things here. So I think I'm going to stop here. I think that's a good taste of what we do for the SSDAN network, and appreciate you know, any questions or interest that you have. And please play around with it. I mean, it's very easy to noodle around with, and I think you might find it useful for your classes as a way to get students interested in data analysis, and especially the census and the American Community Survey. So I'm now going to pass the ball over to Mark Mather about his work with the Population Reference Bureau.
Bill, before we jump in, do you mind if I answered? There were two questions that came up, and I thought we could quickly do it live, if that would be okay.
Sure.
We have a little bit of time. And that is, so we had one question come in about whether the cross tabulations in WebChip can be done at different geographic levels. And that's kind of a complicated answer. But we do have some geography-based data sets. And what I will quickly do is show some of those, if I have just a moment. One moment. All right, hopefully you can all see my screen now. So over on the left, as Bill mentioned, there are some that show under the state level data. So we do have some data sets that are at the state level. So if you click on one of these, there are a few different options. If you go to Earn States, occasionally you will see one that just has a plain name. And you can choose the state from a third drop-down menu. So for this, you can look at earnings, the earnings data set just for example, in this case, Kansas. You can also do it in some cases, actually, the old way is we used to keep them in 51 different data sets, which became a little bit cumbersome. If you wanted to choose from multiple different data sets, it would just be a very, very long list. So we are consolidating. So here you can see that very similar data should be available typically from these data sets as well. The second part of the answer, though, is that beyond states, we don't really produce these types of data sets, in large part because you run into data quality issues. If you were to start looking at the number of respondents who fit, all the criteria, the different cells in this kind of multi-variable table, you'll quickly find that sometimes you'll hit a lot of zeros just because there are no respondents who fit all those criteria in a specific geography. That happens even for some state level sets. It would happen much more if we looked at lower level geographies. So we don't really kind of offer that sort of option typically. The second question that came up, go ahead and stop sharing, had to do with the module submissions into WebChip, into data counts. Typically, the way in which those are reviewed, we have a team of a few faculty members who've worked with our project for over a decade who review the modules that are submitted. Oftentimes, if they have feedback, they will provide the feedback, and we encourage an iterative process where there might be some slight modifications, but then those typically get posted on the site pretty soon thereafter. And I think with that, sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to hit on, answer those questions live since they came in. And with that, Bill, do you have anything else you wanted to add before?
No, I think we're moving into Mark's time, so I think we should move over to Mark.
All right. Go ahead, Mark.
Great. Thanks, JP. Thanks, Bill. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I do have a few slides here. Are you able to see that okay?
Yep.
Great. I'll be pretty brief. I'm Mark Mather. I'm with the Population Reference Bureau. As Bill Frey mentioned, we've been doing this annual workshop at the PAA meeting for quite some time, according to my records, at least 17 years. So that's a long history. I'll be pretty brief. PRB, I think many people know, we have a long history of providing population-related information to non-technical audiences. We are data people, so mostly known for our World Population Data Sheet and population bulletins, but we also produce a lot of data. We compile a lot of data and repackage it. So we've been working with the Annie E. Casey Foundation for their Kids Count data book and Kids Count online indicators for many years, over 30 years on the data book. And then more recently, we've been working in partnership with the Census Bureau, mostly to help them make their data, especially the American Community Survey data, more accessible to data users. So really, in everything that we do, we consider ourselves translators or distillers of demographic concepts and data. So we feel like there's a natural fit between the work that we do here and the information that students need. So we try to make our information useful for things like introductory courses for demography or introductory courses on population. And I know that over the years, many professors have used our population bulletins, for example, in the classroom. So here are just some of the materials that are available on our website that I thought might be useful to folks. And on each of these pages, you will notice there's a link here at the bottom. I think that all of this is being recorded so you don't have to take notes, and I assume the slides can also be made available to folks. But I wanted to start with the World Population Data Sheet, which I believe is still our most popular product. So from PRB's homepage, you can link to our digital World Population Data Sheet, which is shown here. And 2020, we've been producing the data sheet, I think, since the mid-1960s. 2020 was the first year that we did not produce a physical data sheet. So it was print on demand, and we followed that same convention in 2021. So the information in the data sheet is freely available. You can go to the website and either download it, or you can use this interactive site to compare data across different countries and different regions through the website. So I think it is potentially a useful exercise for students to go through in the classroom if they want to compare how countries are doing, how people are doing in different countries across various social, economic, demographic indicators. We also have population bulletins, which remain quite popular and are used widely in undergraduate and graduate courses. 3 of our recent population bulletins are shown here. And the most recent one was just released in January. It's called Dying Young in the United States. And it's really focused on relatively high death rates among children and young adults in the United States, what's causing those relatively high mortality rates and what can be done about it. We also recently published one. The 3rd bulletin shown here is on 2020 census results, and this was published in advance of the 2020 census, but kind of provides a preview of the numbers and topics around the 2020 census and what to expect for the next decade. The most popular bulletin we have is shown in the middle here, and it's an introduction to demography. There have been multiple editions of this, and it used to be called Population: A Lively Introduction. It's been rebranded a little bit over the years, and this bulletin is actually not freely available. It's something that I think if you try to click to it, they'll provide a sample and then a link maybe to Amazon to purchase a copy. But I'm happy to share this copy with you. If anybody's interested in getting a copy of this publication, you can email me. My email is going to be shown at the end of this presentation, and I'll be happy to send you a PDF version of that. You can also go online on PRB's website to access all of the population bulletins that we produced, I think back to 1995, are digitized, and there are more than 75 of them available if you click on this link here at the bottom. We also have a series of videos. We have lots of videos available on PRB's YouTube channel, and some of the most popular products are these distilled demographics videos. Some of these are getting a little bit out of date, but still, I think the basic concepts are all very relevant. Carl Haub, who is now retired from PRB, produced several of these, and they really introduce students to a lot of useful concepts related to key demographic measures and statistics and trends. So actually the most popular one of these is still how many people have ever lived on Earth, which has now over 200,000 views. The answer to that question, if people are wondering, is according to Carl's estimate, about 100 billion people. So it's some people have speculated that there are more people alive today than have ever lived, but in fact, that is not true. Many more people have been alive in the course of human history than are alive today. We have a data center, which includes all of the data in our World Population Data Sheet, and as well as about 20 key social, economic, demographic variables for the United States. The idea behind this was that the Census Bureau's data.census.gov website is comprehensive, provides lots of really provides all of the detailed statistics that you might need from the American Community Survey, but it can be a little hard to navigate. So the idea behind this is to pull out some of the key measures and make them easily available in different formats. So you can customize your display to show tables, bar charts, trend charts, or maps, like this one displayed here, which is for the share of the population ages 65 plus at the county level. We also have, this is in partnership with the Census Bureau, we have an American Community Survey data users group and online community. This site has been growing in popularity. We now have over 3,600 members of the online community. It's free to join. And the point of this website is really, it's a place for people to share information and resources or to ask questions about the ACS. The ACS is a fairly complex survey. It's changing over time. The fact that we have 1-year estimates, 5-year estimates, and lots of, as JP showed, there's lots of very useful data on a variety of topics. This is a place where people can come, especially if they're just getting started with the ACS, they can ask questions about where to access the data they need. And we found that once people type in a question, the response is usually pretty quick. Usually the same day someone will get back to them. So it's another good resource, I think, for students. We do get students posting here who are working on term papers and trying their hand at using the ACS for the first time. For those who want to learn, let me just mention one other thing about the ACS online community. We also do have a link here to ACS conferences. So we've held now 5 ACS conferences since 2014. The last one that we held in 2021, just last year, was entirely virtual, but you can go to this tab at the top to access all the recordings from that conference. We plan to hold another conference in 2023, so next spring, and these events are free to attend. So we don't know yet if the next one will be virtual or in person or some hybrid model, but either way, it won't cost, there won't be any registration fees associated with that. And then for those who want to learn more about the ACS, I co-authored with Linda Jacobson, who just recently retired from her full-time position here at PRB, a new report on the ACS. And this was commissioned by a nonprofit called the Census Project, which is a group that is really supporting the ACS and trying to get additional funding so that the Census Bureau can keep the ACS, keep strengthening the survey and basically meeting the needs of those who depend on these data. So this report is useful not only to describe why the ACS is so important, but also some of the challenges with the survey. So the 2020 American Community Survey, there was a substantially lower response rate, a lower number of final interviews related to the pandemic. But in fact, the response rate for the ACS, as well as lots of other federal surveys, has been in decline for some time. And so this report goes into some of the details about that and what that could mean for data quality moving forward. And if you haven't signed up for the Census Project alerts, I encourage you to do that because they provide lots of useful information about what's happening in Congress, for example, in terms of support for Census Bureau funding. And then finally, if you have not looked at the 1950 census records, which were just made available on Friday, I encourage you to take a look at those and to encourage your students to do that. I think it's potentially a great exercise for students, not just to look up maybe their grandparents, but also to see how the census questions have changed over time, and what that might say about our society changing over time. So this this image I've got here is it's the enumeration district for my neighborhood, which I was able to find using the National Archives search tools back in 1950. I was able to locate the enumeration district, and based on that, find the family that lived in our our house was built in 1946. So we were able to locate the homes on our street and what's likely the first residence in our home. And it turns out it was a young family and a household head who recently served in World War II. So lots of interesting data in here. The information that that you can get from the Census Bureau tools and SSDAN and such are going to be aggregated statistics, privacy protected statistics. But with 1950 and earlier censuses, we've met that after 72 years, these records can become available for everyone. So lots of really interesting information in here, and I encourage you to dig through those numbers. And this is my contact information, my email here at the bottom, as well as my Twitter handle. I'm happy to send me an email if you have any questions about any of this, or I guess you can use the Q&A and I'll try to answer it this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark. I think what we can do is take a 5-minute break now, come back just a minute or so after 2 o'clock, and then we will hear from Andy and Jeff about Social Explorer.
Philippines after 3 o'clock, by the way.
Oh, 3 o'clock. Thank you. All right. Yeah, Chicago time, 2 o'clock. Thank you. This is why we need Andy here to keep us on the ball. So anyway, we'll see you at 3 o'clock. Okay.
Jeff, you should make yourself look, whatever. Jeff, you should make that into a slideshow. Great.
Is it 5 minutes yet, Andy?
I don't know, we haven't lost too many, which is very good.
Okay.
I think everyone should get a gold star for not bailing out here. We should probably start about, I think we can get started.
Yeah, that'd be
Jeff,
great.
are you there?
I am.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, it's very interesting to listen. I always find it very interesting to listen to both Bill and Bill JP, who here's a little secret. JP's become a lawyer. He didn't go into population studies, but he's been working on this for years. And to listen to Bill, JP, and Mark, it gets you kind of an overview of some of the sweep of demography or population studies. And I want to kind of tell you how we got into this a little bit. You go to the next slide, Jeff. So years ago, when I was younger and wiser, probably, I was teaching a course when the 1990 census came out, and we had started mapping it, and we started mapping it, and we'd shown it to a stringer for the New York Times who had come out to Queens. And the next thing you know, Sam Roberts, who is still writing obituaries for the newspaper, came out to see us. And then the next thing you know, and this was during the Clinton nomination convention, we get a call from Sam, and he said, we looked at segregation in New York. We did two maps side by side, 1980, 1990. Bill has done a lot of work on segregation, actually, but on studying it, not doing it. So they looked exactly the same. So we ran a bunch of analysis, and they put it in the paper. And they were getting so bored of politics that they ran it, I think, on the front of the Metro section. And then the New York Times came along, and they said, "Would you like to do this for us?" And I said, "Well, that might be interesting." So we got a contract to work with the New York Times and do work for them. And it turned out that what had happened, since the 90 census was already out, the basic part of it, we ended up using the IPUMs, or the PUMs, excuse me, which is what Bill's project uses. And it's very, it was very interesting. We did a number of analyses focusing on New York. It became kind of a regular thing that got renewed. And 30 years later, or almost 30 years later, my assistant and I still have a contract for the New York Times. And my very first assistant on the project, Jeannie D'Amico, went to work for Mark Mather's shop. And I think she might still be working for them, but she's remote from Penn State. And so I started finding this stuff very, very interesting. And since we had started doing mapping, and I had talked with students. You go to the next slide, Jeff. So I had talked to students, I had shown the maps to the students, and I used to teach statistics. I taught statistics. In fact, I taught statistics quite relatively recently. And I noticed when you teach statistics, the students there's a term, you may have heard this term, it's called MIGO. I don't know how many of you out there have heard the term. MIGO is short for my eyes glaze over. And so if you present, and Bill's also gotten around this by turning statistical or data analysis into something that they might actually be interested in. But I noticed that their eyes lit up when they could do mapping, much more so than with statistics. And at that point in time, it was actually fairly difficult to get to be able to map the census data and the what at that time was called the long form data So we started doing that, and that led eventually to Social Explorer. We had a project with the Times to actually, New York had data going all the way back to 1910, so we got a project with the Times to do that. And then that was folded into the National Historical GIS project. And then we started getting funding from NSF to try to develop this sort of thing. And here are 4 of the major grants. The first one was to compare New York and LA, and we used something, you may have heard of these. We put that data on this outmoded format called a CD. And then we decided, we moved on and decided to try to make it accessible over the web. And so one thing after another, and we ended up developing some of these technologies. Go ahead, Jeff. Flip. And so this is where we are now. We ultimately founded this as a company. We're actually licensed to something on the order of 400 universities. And we have a rich demographic library. We have over 250,000 data indicators, and they're visualized as maps, but we also support graphs. We also support tables, and coming down the road, we're going to support more and more graphs and charts. And it's very possible to use our tools to do exploration, where it makes it possible to download the data into your favorite statistical package. And in the last year, over 1 million users created over 10 million maps. And I should probably have updated that number. So that's what Social Explorer is. And this kind of just gives you a quick list of all the data. We've been talking to the Minnesota people who have, they're going to basically enhance the 1950 data. They've done the same thing with all of the 100% samples from the census going back to 1790, missing the 1890 census, which was burned up. And so it's possible that in a few years, we'll actually be able to have the same kind of tabulated data. We have the tabulated data that was released, but it was pretty hard to tabulate data in the 19th century. The Census Bureau actually started using they started using Hollerith cards and tabulation machines in 1890, and they were actually steam powered. They're like, that was sort of the first mechanical thing doing. But so this shows you some of the other data sets we have, and they're kind of growing all of the time. Go to the next slide, Jeff. And we built Social Explorer. It's on our own technological base. We're the first company in the world to create online mapping using vector-based tiles, which are rendered in the browser. And we also are completely metadata driven. If you don't know what metadata is, you don't have to ask really, but it basically means that we can set things up so that you get quite a lot of choice, but it's also it was able to can it. And as I think as Bill said, we have put both the 2020 census, a large chunk of the 2020 census, down to the block group, and the entirety of the American Community Survey is up in our site. So, and we believe that it's a much faster and easier way to get at either data set. One of the things we did with the 2020 is we aggregated the 2010 to 2020 boundaries so you can immediately look at change without having to go through a lot of trouble. And we also have embedded maps that work on smaller devices. So go ahead to the next slide. So, and we basically support maps and reports. This report is total population, Black or African American. I think we use, this is of course DC, for those of you who don't know. And you can see that the Anacostia area, which is sort of to the lower left in the square area, is quite black. And if you go up there, if we delineated Rock Creek Park, that would, on the left side of Rock Creek Park would be where the whites live, and on the right side would be where you find much more non-white population. Go to the next slide. And we can map at any scale. We go all the way down to the block, all the way up to the, though we haven't put the blocks on for 2020, and I'm not going to discuss too much further why we're probably not going to do that, but you can map all the way down to the block group, all the way up to states and counties. Go ahead, next. And this shows, this map here, we support both shaded maps, and we also support what are called, sometimes called, we support dot density maps, and we also support maps that have bubble maps, so each of which display data. And go to the next. And then we also have a way that you can look at two things side by side. And here, this is New York, and on the left you have the top African American population, and on the right you have median household income of neighborhoods, and you can see the relationship between the it's quick visual to look at the relationship between the income and the racial composition. These are just quick examples. Jeff's going to show some more things. We also support satellite imagery, and this is satellite imagery with shading behind it. I'll go to one more. And then this is one of our cutesy things. This is a map that goes back and forth, a swipe map, so you can see how things have changed at a given area by swiping back and forth. All of these things are used in, are easily accessible, kind of from the front door of our application. And as Jeff will tell you, they've also found their way into some teaching and learning modules. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate that. Nice that everyone's here. It's really appreciated. My name's Jeff Hahn, and today I'm going to walk you through Social Explorer. I'm going to talk about how to explore using the tool. You'll be able to look at, I'll show you the data library and some data sets, how to mask data, change over time, map layers. I'll show you the tools. And then I'm going to walk you through some teach and learn modules that we've developed to give you an idea of how you can integrate this into the undergraduate course. And then I'll show you our demographic profiles tool. There was a question about, is this free or is this a fee? We sell this through the school library. It's based on the FTE of the school. We're very reasonably priced, and we have over 450 libraries within North America using the tool. And so it's very popular within the institutions. And if you're interested in learning more, I'm going to follow up with everyone afterwards and we can chat about it then. So with that, I'm going to escape out of here. Give me 1 second. And so let me walk you through Social Explorer. So when you log in, this is the home page of the site. There's a couple of ways to start digging into the content. You can go to Explore. And from here, you start at a population density map, but you can go in and change the data. And if you see here, this is for 2020, and it shows all the data variables that we have for that year. A lot of these are the ACS and the census. We also have some health information, environmental information, business information that we get from other sources, but we have COVID-19 data on a daily basis going back a couple of years from the beginning of the pandemic. And so if you start here at 2020, everything that's highlighted is available. We have election data. And you can also go in by year. So we go all the way back to the first census. If you wanted to look at population from 1790 census, you can see that here. You can also look at age and race, look at slave population from 1790. So we have all of the historical data going back to 1790 with the US Census. Also from here, we have some basic maps that people are interested in that you can just go right to US citizens voting age population and explore that map. As you can see, you can easily just drill in and see it at the various geography levels that are available. You can look at census tract, by state. So let me do some exploration and show you how it works. So here, I'm at the population density map. If I wanted to, I could easily look at change over time for the last 3 years in population just by clicking Explore Change Over Time. I can look at the past 5 years as well, change over time. And what you can do is go in and change any of these variables. So if I wanted to look at income, all of the ACS categories for 2020 are here. If I wanted to look at households that earn less than $45,000 a year, I just click that. And again, I can drill in at various geography levels and see that. But what I can also do is do comparisons. So if I wanted to, I could go here and compare and do a side-by-side map. So here I'm looking at households less than $45,000 a year. And on the right, maybe I want to compare it to households that earn more than $100,000 a year on the right. So now I have two linked maps doing a comparison. I can zoom in. I can look at it by county. And I can do a comparison. So here in Platte County, Missouri, 39% of the population makes more than $100,000 a year. And 25% of the population earns less than $45,000 a year. And what's interesting about this is you can then go in and build a story around this if you wanted to. So I clicked Start a Story. I can add a cover sheet to this. I can go in and edit my slide and add some info. So if I'm a student in an undergraduate course and I want to do some critical thinking exercise, or I'm a professor who wants to assign some critical thinking activities, I can assign these and have the students build these out. But what we've also done is create some pre-built stories that you can use as well. So if I go to Teach and Learn, Lecture Launchers, you can see here that we've built out about 175 stories focused by discipline and by course. And these give you excellent examples of activities that you can use in a classroom. So if I wanted to, I could go to urban geography and look at something that we built out, suburbanization in the US. And here's a story that we built. We had an author from Trinity College, David Lukens, build this for us. He uses these in his course. And here's a story looking at the suburbanization in the United States. And he's added some text material. And then you can walk through this like a PowerPoint, but what's nice is it's completely interactive. Here we're looking at a little history, the first American commuter suburb. On the left is 1800, on the right is 1850. So we're looking at the population density per square mile in 1850. Here it is in 1800. We're looking at Atlanta and Adair Park. We're looking at the total white population in 1950. Now we're doing a comparison, total white population, 1970 on the left, total population of whites, 1980 on the right. So you can do comparisons that way as well. What you can also do with these is click share. You can send this link to anyone and they can interact with this map even if they don't have access to the program. So as an instructor, you could build out an activity, share it with your students, or you could also embed it in your learning management system as well. So you have the ability to create activities using real data and embed them in your learning management system. And we've also developed for the lecture launchers some LMS questions as well. So if you would like 3 or 4 quiz questions to go along with these lecture launchers to integrate into your course, you can do that as well. A lot of people, so we're looking at growing numbers of Americans that identify as multiracial. What a lot of people do is maybe download this to their account and tailor it for their county or their state. These give you the ability sort of as a jump start for creating your own activities that you can use with your students. When we work with the libraries, we also provide them with a library guide on how to use the product within these key disciplines. And so we support from here training and how to log in. We've developed some assignments and grading rubrics that can be used with your students as well. We've created training modules. From the home page, we can easily show students what our data categories are, how to create a layer library, how to do comparison views. So we provide quite a bit of training as well with the product. We also have our data dictionary here. So if you click that, you can see everything that is in the system. And I'll just stay here on the ACS since that is really our focus today. But we also have a tremendous amount of health data, law enforcement data. We have all of this FBI crime data, this health data. So if I go in, let's say I want to look at the health data, which is different than ACS. What's nice about it is you can do some really nice comparisons with social data with the health data. So if I go in and I can look within the health data for physically unhealthy days per month, mentally unhealthy days per month. And so we've built out quite a few modules in health as an example, but you could go in and if you wanted to look at mentally unhealthy days per month, you could then go in and do a comparison maybe I want to look at mentally unhealthy days per month to race, as an example. So now I'm looking at mentally unhealthy days per month. Higher is darker green. What's the population of African Americans in those areas? And so forth. So you can then get a better understanding of how health compares to social data. Also, you can go in, we have something called demographic profiles. So if I went in here and I wanted to type in let's see. Let me try something else here. Well, let me see what happened here. Chicago, Illinois. I on the fly get a demographic profile for Chicago, Illinois that's focused on demographics, education, economics, households, housing. And so this is just a nice feature. So if you're in a community and you want to take a look at the community around your school, you can just type that in and you get this on the fly. It pulls all of the data that we have in these categories. We have other tools built into here as well. You can go in and create reports of whatever data you're looking at. So you can port out any of the data that we have in our system and then pull it into another program if that's something that you want. You can also mask data. So if you want to only show data for a certain region, you can go in and just click the region that you want and then just mask everything else around it. We also have some map layers that you can add to the map as well. We have a layer library, and we add to this all the time, everything from time zones to parks and open spaces. So if you wanted to add parks and open spaces to your map, you can do that. Seismic hazards, Zillow neighborhoods, colleges and university campuses, nursing homes, hospitals, airports. So you can add all of that to this as well. And with that, I'm going to wrap up my time and see if anybody has any questions. And also, Andy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I just want, someone's asking in the chat, what's the smallest unit? For the census data, we have the 2010 up at the block level. I don't think we're going to put the 2020 up at the block level. The reason is that the Census Bureau has sent out a memo saying they don't think the data are accurate. And, you know, so I don't think it's, you know, so generally we would have from the block group, which is somewhat smaller than the tract, up for the so-called census geographies, which goes block group, tract, county, state. And then we also have zip code, ZICTA, which is a census zip code. We have school districts are up. We have the whole panoply of ACS summary levels, of which there are quite a number. Congressional districts, but of course it was the last Congress. We have state legislative districts, which also was the last state legislature. I don't know when they're going to draw the new ones. Some of the redistricting thing is still in a fight. But so there are lots of different geographies. Oh, and some places are actually smaller than tracts. So we have all the places, which are about 29,000, all of the towns, which I think are about 30-something thousand. And then we have all of the block groups, which are about 235,000, and all of the census tracts, which currently are about 75,000 and will be, well, I guess they'd be 84,000 in this, because we're using this has the 2020 geographies, as does the 2020 census that we put up. So, you know, so the idea here, now these are the aggregate data, and Bill Frey's work, and I think some of what Mark Mather does is really based on the public use microsample. We do have those areas up, and there are some tabulations based on those areas. So I'd say in terms of the geography levels, we've handled it quite a lot. And blocks, we would have put blocks up if they hadn't put in this noise thing.
Thanks, Andy. You know, there's a few questions here I'll answer quickly. Someone asked about nonprofits. You know, it really, that's a new area for us, and we're doing very well with nonprofits using the tool to help with their service area and supporting their community. And if you're interested in that, you can send me a note. I'm going to follow up with everybody who attended anyway and send you information on how to contact me and get access, and we can talk about that. There are schools in Michigan at the university level that have the program, but not at the public library of Michigan right now. And then there was another question. If you want to know if your university library is partnered with you, I will follow up with everyone, and I'll send a note to people that have access, and I'll send a different note to people that don't have access. But please note that we are happy to provide a free trial to people to play around with the tool. And, we can make that go for, a few months so that you can get an understanding of how it works. And I'll send everybody links and such to it as well.
In terms of the memo at the Census Bureau about, it went out by Ron Jarman. We'll try to, we have some information on the census's issues around their noise injection, and so we'll try to get that to you. I'm trying oh, one other thing I want to mention in terms of access, because of the pandemic, we do allow, and this actually works very well. If a student is at a campus or faculty member is at a campus that has access, currently we will check for your EDU address, and if you're an EDU that has a license to the software, automatically will set up a personal license that would work anywhere. So if you're off campus, you can just log on with that license. You don't have to go through the the complications that sometimes follow getting access through a library. And that we pushed that during the pandemic. A number of our user groups were very interested in that. So we try to make this easy to use, particularly if it's in a situation with a license. In terms of nonprofit, we have a special lower rate for nonprofits, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps up our portion of it. If anybody has any other questions, send them to the chat now and I'll take a look. But other than that, I'll turn it back over.
Well, thanks, everybody. These were a very, very informative and rich overview of Social Explorer, and I know people are going to really be interested in following up in all kinds of ways. We're more or less finished with the formal part of our discussion, our presentation, but if people do have questions, I think you can put them in there and see what we can do. All of us are available afterwards for emailing and so forth. You can just send us some information, send us your questions, and all of us have given the websites and so forth of what you need. I think this is a lot to absorb in the better part of 2 hours, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. I don't know, Andy, do you see any questions, or Jeff, that we need to be looking at?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much. For those of you who are part of the Population Association, we'll let JP, if he has anything more. Does he want, JP, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Nope, I just wanted to say thank you, everyone. Go ahead, Bill. That's all I had to say.
So anyway, for those of you who are here or going to either virtually or in person to the Population Association meetings, I hope you enjoy them. I'll be tuning in. I know the rest of us will. And for those of you who are just here for this session, we wish you well, and please use this. Please try them out. Please get back to us with your questions and your reactions. We just appreciate having you here today for another one of our PAA sessions on teaching with the Census and the American Community Survey.
Yeah, and I want to put a special shout out for the ACS user group, which if you join that, Mark didn't mention this, but if people ask questions, and there have been a tremendous number of questions about the 2020 census that have come across the ACS user group since the 2020 census was released. And that would be another very good place to ask questions, particularly about the 2020 census, even though it's not called the ACS at 2020 census user group.
Okay, with that, we will leave you off to do other things today. I'm sure you're all
Oh,
busy.
the
with
last,
other
I have a
activities.
there's a last question here. Does ACS have educational attainment at the census block level? No, but they have it at the census block group level.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Very nice meeting. We really appreciate you running this. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. Let's do it again next year.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.